In the polished heart of Lekki Phase 1, where the streets gleam with German cars and the air hums with the quiet throb of wealth, Adaora Nwosu reigned like a quiet queen. She was the kind of woman Lagos women whispered about and Lagos men admired from a respectful distance. At 33, her beauty was effortless, smooth caramel skin that glowed without makeup, almond-shaped eyes that held both fire and wisdom, and a gait that spoke of both discipline and grace. She owned a fashion house named Ada Gold Couture, known for dressing first ladies, Nollywood elites, and oil tycoons' wives. But Adaora's success wasn't just stitched in lace and velvet. It was woven in integrity, long nights, and quiet prayers muttered into her grandmother's old Bible. To her family in Anambra, Adaora was a walking trophy, the first daughter, the one who made them proud at weddings and burial ceremonies. Her late father, Pa Nwosu, once declared at a village gathering, "If Adaora were a son, I'd still say I'm the luckiest man in the East." And indeed, fortune seemed to dance around her. She lived in a white-painted duplex with golden railings, shared with her husband, Obinna Okafor, a dashing, sharply suited real estate magnate known across Lagos Island. He was tall, smooth-talking, and always smelled of Tom Ford and confidence. Together, they were the power couple of the Sunday brunch circuit, invited to every exclusive party, photographed on every luxury blog. But what the world saw was the picture, not the frame. Beneath the shimmering surface of Adaora's perfect life, a quiet storm was gathering. Envy wears many faces, and sometimes it comes wearing your bloodline. The day Chinwe Nwosu returned to Nigeria, the sun refused to hide. Even the clouds seemed to part, as if Lagos itself craned its neck to witness her arrival. She stepped out of the tinted black SUV in front of her sister's Lekki home, dressed in a fiery red designer jumpsuit that clung to her like scandal. Her imported wig bounced with each strut, and her lips, painted the color of blood and ambition, curved into a smile that made the gateman forget to breathe. "Big sis!" she called out, arms wide, as if time and distance hadn't stretched the bond between them into something brittle. Adaora, standing in her floral Ankara wrapper with her head tie slightly loosened, embraced her, unaware that what she hugged wasn't just a sister, but a storm dressed in Gucci. Chinwe had lived the last 5 years in London, chasing clout and carving a digital empire built on filters, fake smiles, and men with fast cars. Her Instagram glittered with vacation photos, champagne breakfasts, and quotes about manifesting luxury, but behind the lens, her rent was often overdue, and her relationships lasted just long enough to fund her next selfie. She had watched Adaora from afar, the stable business, the picture-perfect marriage, the admiration she got from uncles, aunties, and even old village women. It burned Chinwe like unspoken shame. In her eyes, Adaora had everything by playing good girl, while she, the bold one, remained in Adaora's shadow. Now back in Lagos, she made a quiet vow beneath her breath as she stepped into the house. "This time, I'm not sitting second. I'll be seen. I'll be chosen." And just like that, the serpent coiled itself silently between the sisters, smiling, painted, and waiting. Obinna Okafor had built empires from nothing but cement and charm. Men feared his business mind. Women whispered about his tailored suits and deep pockets. But even empires, it seemed, could fall at the sway of a well-oiled waist. From the moment Chinwe Nwosu entered his home with her red-bottom heels and thunderous laugh, Obinna's gaze betrayed him. He was a man of 45, wealthy, married, powerful, but he suddenly found himself staring like a teenager. Where Adaora moved like still water, calm and composed, Chinwe entered every room like a fire lit beneath dry leaves. Her dresses hugged her figure too tightly, her perfume lingered too long, and her words danced just close enough to the edge of disrespect. Obinna told himself he was simply being friendly with his wife's younger sister. But late at night, when the house grew quiet and Adaora lay asleep in their room upstairs, he'd find himself seated across from Chinwe in the dimly lit kitchen, talking about life, Lagos, and laughter. Her legs crossed like question marks. Her smile said, "I see you." The staff noticed first, the way Obina's eyes followed her like a hawk watches a chick, the unnecessary compliments he paid her, the extra bottles of wine he began to order only after Chinwe moved in. Gossip bloomed like wildflowers in the servants' quarters. "Did you see how she touched his shoulder?" One whispered. "That's not how a sister-in-law behaves," another hissed. Even the gardener, mute as a statue for years, shook his head once and spat into the soil. But Obina saw none of it, or rather, chose not to. To him, Chinwe was excitement, youth bottled in gloss and glitter. He began coming home earlier than usual, dressing sharper, laughing louder when she was near. He hadn't planned it, but from the moment he looked at her too long, he simply could not look away. The Harmattan breeze had barely settled when Adaura's phone rang just before dawn, its shrill tones slicing through the velvet hush of Lekki's quiet streets. She stirred, her silk wrapper clinging to her skin like a second warning, and reached for the phone with a sense of unease. It was Mama Nwosu, calling from their ancestral home in Nini, Anambra. Her voice trembled with urgency, not fear, but that peculiar vibration the elderly reserved for messages from the spirit world. "Ada M.," she began. "I saw a chicken dancing with a snake last night. They circled each other in a courtyard of fire, smiling as if it were a wedding." Adaora sat upright. She knew better than to dismiss Mama's dreams. In their family, visions were not fantasy. They were ancestral whispers woven into the night. Mama continued, her voice now thick with riddles. "The chicken wore your coral beads, and the snake, he wore a man's voice. But when the drum stopped, the chicken burned its wings, and the snake swallowed its own tail." Adaora felt the words settle like cold stones in her stomach. The old woman offered no direct names, no accusations, only symbols. That was the way of the elders. She ended with a final warning. "Nuam, look around you. When a familiar tree begins to grow strange fruit, do not wait until it drops on your head. Then silence. No goodbye, no breath, only the low hum of a line cut by fate." Adaora sat frozen, the morning sun now brushing the lace curtains beside her. Her heart pounded, not because she understood the dream completely, but because a part of her already did. She rose slowly, walked to the mirror, and stared long and hard. Somewhere, unseen but certain, something had shifted in her world, and the ancestors had noticed first. It began with a whisper too soft to hear, a gaze held a second too long. Chinwe's laughter, once sisterly and warm, now carried a syrupy sweetness whenever Obina entered the room. Adaora noticed, but she did not name it. Not yet. She told herself it was nothing, that Chinwe was simply bold, that Obina was merely polite. But beneath the gloss of family dinners and high society brunches, desire began to ferment, thick and slow, like palm wine left too long under the sun. Chinwe had studied her sister's husband like a final exam. His cravings, his business worries, the scent of oud he liked in his cologne, the way his eyes lingered when she wore red. And Obina, weak-willed behind his wealth, began to drift like a leaf on shallow water. A stolen touch here, a late-night phone call masked as business. And then, the kiss. It happened behind velvet curtains at a charity gala. Chinwe leaned in to whisper something harmless, and her lips brushed his cheek, then paused. Too long. That pause was the fall of the first domino. After that, nothing stayed innocent. Obina began to send her secret parcels. Cartier bracelets wrapped in handwritten notes, hotel keys tucked in designer handbags, envelopes of dollars for her influencer dreams. Chinwe would walk past Adaora wearing the same diamond necklace Obina had once promised to gift her. Adaora's world remained calm on the surface, but beneath, a slow betrayal oozed like oil leaking from a clay pot. Her husband came home later and later, his scent mixed with strange perfume. Her sister no longer prayed with her at night. What she didn't know was that her marriage bed had become a throne of secrets, and her own blood was sitting on it, smiling. There is a kind of silence that speaks louder than any scream, a silence that creeps through the walls of a once joyful home like a shadow after dusk. Adaora felt it everywhere now. The laughter that used to echo in the dining room had turned into awkward throat clearing. Obinna, once attentive and warm, had become a stranger in designer kaftans, his eyes buried in his phone, his replies short and sharp. He no longer complimented her cooking, no longer asked about her fashion line. He returned late, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and unfamiliar lies. The air between them was thick with unspoken truths, and every corner of their luxurious Lekki home felt colder, lonelier, haunted by the ghost of a love that was still alive but slowly bleeding. Chinwe, meanwhile, moved with the confidence of a queen on stolen land. Her footsteps no longer echoed with humility. She began redecorating the house subtly, new curtains in Obinna's favorite color, foreign wine replacing Adaora's herbal teas, a touch of French perfume lingering long after she left a room. One night, as Adaora gathered laundry for the cleaner, her fingers paused on Obinna's white shirt. A smear of red lipstick, too bold to be hers, bloomed like a wound on the collar. Adaora held the shirt in her hands for a long moment, the fabric trembling between her fingers. Her heart, though bruised, did not scream. It whispered, it knew, it mourned. That night she sat alone at the dinner table as the generator hummed faintly in the background, staring at two untouched plates, his cold and abandoned, hers forgotten. The silence was no longer empty. It was loud, crackling with betrayal, thick with the smell of truth. And still she said nothing. Not yet, for even a lioness watches before she pounces. The morning sun filtered through the silk curtains of the Nwosu household, but there was no warmth in the air. Adaora sat quietly at the dining table, still dressed in her ivory nightgown, her eyes fixed on the pale green envelope in her trembling hands. It bore Obinna's signature, firm, unfeeling, final. The divorce papers lay there like a dagger wrapped in civility. He had not even delivered them himself. A courier in a creaseless suit had done it. No words, no explanations, just legal ink where love used to live. It was then that Adaora realized the Obinna she once loved had died long ago, killed softly in the arms of her own sister. Chinwe entered the room barefoot, with practiced concern painted on her face and the scent of Yves Saint Laurent L'Homme, Obinna's favorite cologne, clinging to her skin like guilt. She knelt beside Adaora, placing a manicured hand on her sister's arm. "Nay, I'm so sorry." "Maybe it's for the best," she murmured, voice laced with sugar and shame. But Adaora did not look at her. She simply rose, walked to the wardrobe, and began to pack. Her fingers moved gently over her folded wrappers, her coral beads, her wedding picture tucked in the corner. One of the beads slipped from her hand and broke on the marble floor. Kpai! Its echo sharper than any insult. She paused, picked up the pieces one by one, and continued packing in silence. She did not cry. Not then. Not in front of the thief. Dignity had always been her crown, and she would wear it even now, even as her world crumbled beneath her. Outside, the mango tree whispered in the wind. Inside, Adaora closed her suitcase, and with it, the chapter of a love built on lies. The golden chandeliers of the Eco-Atlantic Grand Hotel shimmered like stars captured in crystal. The air was thick with perfume, pride, and pretense. Chinwe Nwosu walked down the marble aisle in a dress stitched with diamonds that glittered like betrayal in the light. Her hips swayed confidently, her gel rising like a crown of conquest. At her side stood Obinna Okafor, once Adaora's husband, now her stolen groom. He wore a pristine white agbada with gold embroidery, eyes glazed in arrogance, lips curved in a hollow smile. Cameras flashed like lightning on a dry day, and the air carried whispers sharper than broken glass. "Isn't that his ex-wife's sister?" someone murmured over a flute of moe. Another voice, too drunk to filter judgment, said, "What money can't buy, shame will wear." But Chinwe heard none of it. She was drunk, not just on champagne, but on victory, illusion, and stolen glory. Outside the celebration, a quiet absence spoke louder than the band's saxophone. Adaora, the woman whose heart was broken and whose life had been gutted, was nowhere to be found. She had vanished weeks earlier. No social media posts, no farewell words, no public tears. Some said she had returned to their ancestral village in Anambra. Others said she had entered a season of deep prayer and silence. But even in her absence, her name hung in the air like sacred incense, felt, respected, and unspoken. Chinwe, despite all her glitter, could not erase the shadow of the woman she had betrayed. Yet, as the guests cheered and the wedding cake stood like a monument of vanity, Chinwe smiled wide for the cameras, believing she had won. But what she didn't know was this: the gods of justice do not sleep, and wealth gained by treachery never lasts beyond the season of harvest. The sky above Banana Island turned gray that morning, not from rain, but from the weight of silence settling over the Okafor mansion. Just 3 months prior, the villa had echoed with the clink of champagne glasses, the shimmer of Jella and Agbada, and the shallow laughter of Lagos socialites dancing on marble floors. Obinna and Chinwe had been the golden couple, envied, worshipped, photographed. But the music had stopped. One phone call from his lawyer was all it took. The Blue Heights Estates deal, the crown jewel of Obinna's real estate empire, had collapsed. The land was under government scrutiny for fraudulent acquisition, and whispers of corruption had reached the ears of the EFCC. Within hours, the men in black suits came, not with guns, but with documents and frozen smiles. They didn't knock. They entered like the judgment of the ancestors. Obinna stood at the foot of the grand staircase, barefoot, watching them peel through his files, seize his servers, and tape up his office. His voice, once loud and commanding, now trembled like a child in a shrine. Chinwe, wrapped in her Versace robe, stood at the balcony, staring down in disbelief. She tried calling her banker, then her stylist, then her influencer manager. No one picked up. Her followers had begun to notice. The glamorous couple hadn't posted in days. The last video, her dancing in diamonds, now seemed like mockery. The staff, once eager and obedient, exchanged glances and whispered behind pantry doors. Even the generator, once roaring proudly, had died in protest. By evening, their mansion, once filled with jazz and laughter, was quiet, except for the ticking clock and the gentle hum of disgrace. The feast was over. What remained was the ash of pride, scattered across their designer rugs. Banana Island, once the crown jewel of Lagos's elite, now stood as a mocking ghost of Chinwe's broken dreams. The white mansion that once echoed with laughter, clinking champagne glasses, and the hum of air conditioning had turned into a lifeless shell. The marble floors no longer welcomed red-bottomed heels, and the once busy chef's kitchen stood cold, the scent of peppered goat meat and jollof rice replaced by the sterile bitterness of silence. Obinna sat in his study, staring blankly at eviction papers sealed with the crimson stamp of the bank, property repossessed due to unpaid debt. The Range Rover, his pride on 4 wheels, was towed at dawn, its roar silenced forever. Chinwe stood by the window, her silk robe clinging to her body like faded glory, watching strangers trample her rose garden while taking inventory of what once belonged to her. Calls to friends went unanswered. Chinwe had tried reaching her bridal train sisters, the same ones who had once flown to Dubai with her for bridal content. None picked up. Their usernames were still there, yes, but the warmth had disappeared. The group chats had gone silent. Where once there were fire emojis under her posts, now there were whispers and memes circulating in private. From banana to backyard, one headline read, mocking her fall from grace. She had traded her soul and her sister's trust for the crown of high society, only to find it made of ash. The designer gowns were boxed and sold by the bank. The walk-in closet where she once posed for mirror selfies now held dust and forgotten hangers. Banana Island, a place of dreams, had shown her the kind of nightmare that only the greedy ever dream of. There was a time when Chinwe Nwosu's smile lit up Lagos like fireworks in December. Her face was plastered across billboards in Lekki, her Instagram stories filled with luxury perfumes, rooftop parties, and soft-focused selfies with the caption, "Blessed and booked." She had been the girl who snatched her sister's husband and wore him like a designer handbag, flaunting him for likes, posing beside Bentleys that didn't belong to her, and hosting Q&A sessions on how to level up as a woman of value. But now the internet that once praised her had turned its back with the same ferocity it once admired her. Wi-Fi had been cut off in their repossessed mini-flat in Gibagada. The iPhone was outdated. Her brand deals, wigs, waist trainers, detox teas evaporated like perfume in sun. The comments became knives, from Banana Island to Banana Peel. She chopped life with another woman's husband. Now life is chopping her. Sister, go apologize and touch grass. Screenshots of her wedding now appeared beside memes of when karma loads faster than MTN network. The same followers who had once worshipped her style now used her downfall as content. One influencer even did a before and after TikTok with Chinwei's picture beside a sack of Gary. That night, Chinwei sat in darkness, her ring removed. Obina passed out from cheap alcohol. The sound of the ceiling fans stalling above them was louder than ever. Regret curled itself around her like a python, tight, breathless, and shameful. She picked up her phone. No data. Her face stared back from the black screen like a ghost of a life that once glittered. And for the first time in months, she whispered, "Adaora, I'm sorry," though there was no network to send it through. The once glamorous Chinwe Nwosu stepped down from the rickety bus with a faded designer handbag slung across her thin shoulder, her once glossy wig stiff with dust and shame. The Anambra sun scorched her skin like judgment as she placed her first step on the red earth, the very soil she had long abandoned for marble floors and city noise. Gone were the lashes, the cameras, the champagne brunches. What remained was a hollow-eyed woman in worn slippers, her spirit crushed under the weight of disgrace. Children paused their games to gape. Women whispered beneath their wrappers. The air itself seemed to tighten around her, as though the land remembered, as though the land refused to forget. The village square had changed little. The same ancient trees whispered secrets above, their branches stretching like arms of ancestors pointing in silent disapproval. The elders seated under the Udala tree froze when they saw her. At their eyes, sharp as cutlass blades, followed every step she took toward the family compound. "Is that not Chinwe?" one murmured. "The one who danced in Lagos with her sister's husband?" Another spat, his cola nut trembling in his hand. Chinwei's throat burned with regret, but she kept walking, each step slower than the last, her feet coated in dust like someone mourning her own soul. When she reached the compound gate, she hesitated. She could smell the familiar blend of wood smoke, fried ugu, and ancestral silence, and yet it no longer felt like home. The land beneath her feet throbbed with memory, with justice, with consequence. She was not just returning to Adaora. She was returning to judgment, to truth, and to the ashes of her own betrayal. The red earth did not embrace her. It watched, it whispered, and it waited. The midday sun beat gently upon the red earth of Umueke village, casting long shadows beneath the ancient Udala tree, where Adaora often sat weaving raffia mats for the orphanage. The air smelled of dust and palm kernels, and the world was quiet, until Chinwe, once the goddess of Lagos high society, now barefoot and trembling, appeared like a ghost dragged from a forgotten dream. Her makeup was gone, her nails chipped, and the once silken voice that flirted with power now cracked like old pottery. She dropped to her knees before her sister, her head bowed so low her forehead kissed the ground. "Nwanam, Biko, forgive me." Her voice broke with each syllable. "I was blind. I was foolish. I wanted your life so badly that I destroyed mine in the process." Adaora did not move immediately. She stared at her sister through eyes that held the weight of betrayal but no hatred. Her wrapper, simple but neat, rustled softly in the breeze, like the whispering voice of their late grandmother. Finally, she stood and stepped closer, her shadow casting a cool blanket over Chinwe's weeping form. "You wanted my life?" she said, voice low and measured. "Then take the long nights I cried alone. Take the shame I wore like a second skin when our mother couldn't lift her face in church. Take the silence of a broken heart stitched together with dignity." Chinwe sobbed louder, clutching the hem of Adaora's wrapper, but her sister gently stepped back. Chinwe, she said, you dug a hole for me and fell inside it yourself, and now you beg for my rope. Her voice softened. I do not hate you. I pray you heal. But forgiveness is not a doorway back into my life. It is the gate that lets you walk your own. The air in Nini village was thick with late afternoon humidity, and the cicadas sang their shrill songs among the trees. Beneath the old Udala tree where their grandmother once told moonlight tales, Chinwe knelt on the red earth, her once manicured fingers now trembling, coated in dust and shame. The silk scarf on her head was stained with sweat. Her makeup, what little she could afford, ran in lines down her cheeks. Before her stood Adaora, dressed in a simple wrapper and blouse, her face bare but radiant with the kind of peace that comes only after surviving betrayal and fire. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the night Ogen and Obina had slipped that ring on Chinwe's finger in a hotel ballroom glittering with stolen wealth. I was wrong, Chinwe whispered, her voice cracking like old wood. I thought I was winning. I thought he loved me more. She looked up, desperate. Dim, Biko, forgive me. I've lost everything. Adaora stared at her sister, not with hatred, but with the weight of 1,000 unspoken memories, childhood laughter under the mango tree, the whispered secrets of girlhood, and the sharp knife of betrayal that followed. Her silence pressed heavier than any insult. Then, in a voice as calm as still water, she spoke. You chose fire, Chinwe, and now you carry the heat. Forgiveness is not always reunion. Her words didn't rise, they didn't shout, but they landed like thunder, final and divine. And with that she turned away, her steps quiet, her spine straight, her dignity wrapped around her like a queen's robe. Chinwe remained on her knees, the dust of her greed clinging to her soul, watching the sister she once envied disappear into the light of her own freedom. Under the full moon's watchful eye, the village square lay bathed in silver light. Children sat cross-legged on woven mats, their eyes wide, their mouths ajar, as the old storyteller, Papa Ebube, stirred the embers in his clay hearth. The flames crackled softly, dancing like spirits with secrets to tell. He leaned forward, his bearded face framed by a faded red cap, and with a voice as textured as ancestral drums, he began. Children, this is not just a tale of two sisters. It is a lesson carved into the bones of time. Chinwe, the younger, wore beauty like a mask and chased riches like a goat chases cassava peels. But what she stole in pleasure, she paid for in pain. She thought a man with gold was a ladder to glory, but she did not know that gold without honor becomes heavy like chains. He paused, letting the night breathe. An owl hooted in the distance. Chinwe now walks through the markets of Lagos unseen. Once a bride on magazine covers, she now hides her face beneath sunglasses, whispering prayers to a god she ignored. The mansion is gone. The fame is dust. The man she took crumbles beside her, bitter and broke. That, my children, is the ash left behind when greed burns too hot. Papa Ebube shifted his weight and turned to the east, where the moonlight kissed the silhouette of Adaora's village home, quiet and dignified. And Adaora? She planted her pain into the soil of wisdom. From it rose a new life, simple yet rich with peace. She wears no crown, yet walks like a queen, because dignity, once worn, outshines diamonds. He picked up a kola nut and cracked it with purpose. So listen well, O children of tomorrow. The yam stolen at night may fill the belly, but it curses the harvest.